Hello everyone and welcome to Learning Sim Racing episode 6. Now starting with this episode, we are going to start also looking at different genres of racing that you can find throughout your sim racing experience. The first one we are going to be looking at is going to be in the sports car family class, and that is going to be GT4 and GT3 racing respectively. I'm your main host for this series, Nightlock, and joining me today is going to be a special guest by the name of Soviet Kagamine. He will be teaching you all about GT3 driving. Now, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and start getting into this. Starting off with GT4, there are a few things that you need to keep in mind when you are going to look at doing GT4 racing. The GT4 class is some of the closest counterparts to the actual road-going versions of the cars that you see out on track. What this is going to mean is compared to some of the higher GTs, GT3, GTE, GT1 cars from the past, you're going to be seeing a lot less acceleration, a lot less downforce, and a lot less top speed from a majority of these cars. What this means is these cars are going to be very much so more momentum driven and will also focus more heavily on mechanical grip instead of aerodynamic grip like what you see from a lot of higher GT and sports car classes of racing. Now, a lot of times with the GT4 cars, you will see a varied transmission style. Some of them will come with the standard sequentials that you're going to be used to seeing if you look at anything such as Genetted GT5s, whether you look at GT3, GTE. Some of the GT4 cars will come with that same sequential style transmission. Now, the exact assists that come on that transmission may differ from car to car. Some may come with an auto blip, some may come with an auto release of the gas for upshifts, but they do come with the sequential, which means you won't need to use clutch for shifting. Now, some of the cars, especially if you drive some slightly older GT4 cars, may come with an H-gate transmission. What that means is you will generally need to use the clutch when you are driving these cars, and it's going to make them much more tricky for you to effectively use when out on track. So if you decide that you want to go with GT4 racing, that is going to be something that needs to factor into the decision of what car you want to take. Now, GT4, just as with GT3, is going to come with a few assists on the car itself that you can try and make use of. Now, I'm not going to get too in-depth with the assists on this portion of the video, because in the GT3 portion, we will be getting a little bit more in-depth onto how the assists work, and in the next section, or in the next video, which will be over GTE and LMP racing, endurance racing, we will be getting very in-depth on how the traction control systems work. So I will be very brief on this point. But generally, you will see GT4 cars come with both traction control and ABS. Now, traction control is your general system to help control the amount of tire slip that you have going through the corner by reducing the amount of power that's being output to the wheels. It's going to help you keep a little bit better control of the car when going through a corner and when accelerating out heavily. An ABS system is going to help you when it comes to braking. It's going to be a system that allows you to not lock up the brakes as much by releasing a bit of pressure whenever the brakes do lock. However, this comes at the cost of braking efficiency, as due to the fact that it releases some of the pressure on the brakes to open them back up, it does mean you will increase the amount of distance that it takes to slow the car down for a corner. Now, generally for GT4 racing, you are going to see a bit of a variety in the race lengths depending on what series you're running. Now, most series are going to run anywhere from about 45 minutes to an hour long races. However, there are some times where you may find a longer mini enduro type race going upwards of 2.5 hours, and generally those races will have a mandatory driver swap in them. That means you will need another driver there with you to get the car around track. Now, as I stated earlier, with these cars being closer to their road counterparts than GT3s are, and coming with less grip overall and less acceleration top speed out of corners, they are going to be very momentum based. What this means is to get the most out of the cars, you need to be very smooth with your braking and know how to effectively carry a lot of extra speed through the corners. That way you can keep up as much pace as possible, because trying to get these cars back up to speed may not happen as quickly as it would if you were driving something such as a GT3 car. Now, all the cars in the GT4 series do have to follow a general BOP. What this means is all the cars should be fairly competitive on track. However, each car will still have its individual strengths. One car may be better with acceleration out of corners, another may be better with its overall top speed, and another car may be better with the way it handles going through a corner. With that in mind, you do need to make sure you look at the tracks that are being ran. That way you can get a good idea of what a competitive car will be. You also need to look at what kind of driving style is going to suit each car. Again, with every car having its own unique strengths, it can be a good idea to choose a car that plays well into your driving style with its strengths. If you are good with keeping up a lot of mid-corner apex speed, then it can be advantageous for you to choose a car that is much better handling and much more nimble, but maybe not as quick getting out of the corners, or maybe not as good with getting up to speed. If you aren't that good with carrying mid-corner speed, then it may be more advantageous for you to choose a car with better acceleration or top speed that can get out of the corners quicker and try and make up that pace deficit lost in mid-corner apex speed back up on the straights. Now, this is something that we will elaborate on more as we go through the series of how to choose cars based on tracks. But with that, I'm going to pass it over to my host, Soviet Kagamine, to take over for the GT3 section.
Alright, so you want to know how to drive a GT3 car. That's fun. I can teach you in a jiffy. First things first, we're going to figure out what exactly a GT3 car is. GT3 car is a near top level production based race car built to allow professional and amateur drivers to compete. The fields are often very diverse. They feature ABS and traction control. They have moderate levels of downforce and are relatively forgiving compared to the higher tier cars out there. Now, how do you drive one of these cars? First things first, you want to know that ABS and traction control are there to help you, not to fix your mistakes. They're simply an assist to make you go faster and make it easier for amateur drivers to compete. That's why GT3 is so diverse, because we have amateur drivers competing at the same time, giving money to the teams so that the teams can use that money for various other things. So first things first, let's talk about ABS. Do not fully depress the brake on ABS. The ABS works by getting rid of some brake pressure so that the wheels don't lock up. You want to be threshold braking the entire time, because threshold braking will allow you to brake deeper and for shorter amount of time, because you're applying as much pressure as the car can give without the car actually backing out of pressure on the brake. So let's move on to traction control. Traction control, if you're not careful, will slow you down by seconds. Again, it's there to make you go faster, not to fix your mistakes and fix your poor throttle management. You still got to use throttle control, and you still got to make sure that when you're exiting the corner, you're as straight as possible so that the traction control can actually help you get the lap time out of the car. Now, how do you choose a GT3 car? So the cars range from small nippy things like the Audi R8 to actual land yachts like the Mercedes-AMG GT3. If your goal is to simply be as competitive as possible, brand loyalty is not in your vocabulary. In no way, shape, or form should you really care about what brand of car you're driving unless you have some lucrative sponsorship deal, in which case, good work on you. Some cars will always be more competitive than others. It really just depends on the game, the BOP, and the BOP could just change on a whim whenever it feels like it. My fellow iRacing drivers, we know that feeling. You cannot expect to be the fastest car on track if the car itself is slow. So say on iRacing you're driving the Ford GT3. You're going to be slow in that car because it's just not a good car. Sure, it's fun to drive. I personally kind of enjoy driving it sometimes, but it's not a car you should expect to actually do well in. It's not an Audi R8 or a McLaren MP4. It's neither of those. You're not going to get the lap times. However, if you choose a car that's actually going to help you go fast like an Audi R8 or like an AMG GT3, then you can start being more competitive. It's all the meta. You got to understand the meta of your game. Now, I can't say I'm an expert in any game, but I can tell you one thing. If you drive a Ford in iRacing, you're going to lose. It's as simple as that. Now, you can't exactly expect the fastest car on paper to be the fastest car throughout the race. I'll give you an example. The Spa 24 on iRacing, my own team went for the McLaren for its top car for numerous reasons that include fuel economy. Because the way that the McLaren's fuel economy worked in the fuel strategy for that race is that we had to do one less pit stop. Sure, we didn't have the same speed as the BMW Z4s, but because we didn't have to take an extra stop that those BMWs had to do, even though they were faster, we actually gained a lot of time on them. We speaking as the team, because I had nothing to do with it. They got the win because they had the superior fuel strategy. So just because the car is fast on paper, it does not mean it's going to be the best car. And if it means having to lift off the throttle occasionally and just saving more and more fuel, then so be it. But the biggest tip I have for you is to just research other people's data and practice. You're not going to get anywhere by me just telling you all this sort of stuff and crossing your fingers that you're going to do well the next VRS GT3 race. You just have to work hard and practice, because these cars are interesting to drive, to say the least. They're very forgiving, but man, if you're slow in that, you're going to have a real bad time. So thank you very much.
And that is going to do it for episode 6 of Learning Sim Racing, guys. This episode was covering some of the details that you need to know for the first level of sports car racing that you may be looking at, which is going to be GT4 and GT3 racing. I want to say thank you to Soviet Kagamine for coming on to this episode and talking about GT3 racing. That way you guys can get a better understanding of the way that the racing works and the cars drive from someone with more experience with it. But with that, guys, I will see you in the next episode, continuing on with some more sports car racing. This time, going to endurance.
What is reflected in my eyes? Another one night in a starless midnight. The showers on the people passing by. One is so small and the world's so